Did you ever get blamed for something you didn't do, just because you were easy to blame?
At my promotion celebration, the moment I had been waiting for after years of grinding late nights, sacrificing weekends, and doing everything in my power to prove I was more than just the dependable background character in my own family, my sister decided to walk in wearing a wedding dress, laughing like she had just pulled the cleverest prank in the world, tossing out the words, "Thought I'd steal the show again," while everyone around us tried to process what they were even looking at. I wish I could say it shocked me, but in some strange way, it didn't, because this was the kind of thing Vanessa lived for, stealing moments that didn't belong to her, twisting the spotlight, and watching me try to hold my composure while she made herself the story. You know, when you work as hard as I did to get that promotion, you want at least one evening to feel like it was yours, just one chance to stand there and hear people clap for you without an interruption, without someone else deciding they should be the headline. But of course, with Vanessa, that was never going to happen. She walked into the restaurant like she was stepping onto some grand stage, laughing and holding up the skirt of the dress like it was the funniest thing in the world, while people turned their heads, unsure if this was a joke or some weird announcement, and in that instant, I could feel the air in the room change. My boss, who had just given me a kind toast about my dedication and leadership, looked confused. Coworkers I respected were whispering, and even my parents were smiling nervously. Like somehow this ridiculous stunt was charming instead of humiliating. I kept my face calm, but inside, I was burning, not just because of the dress, but because of the way she leaned into me with that smirk that said, "You'll never beat me at this game." The game she had been playing since childhood, where she disrupted my moments and then walked away like she hadn't done anything wrong. People laughed awkwardly. Someone even clapped like this was some performance, and suddenly my promotion felt like the side story, while Vanessa, in her imaginary wedding, was the main event. And the worst part wasn't even the dress, it was the way she looked around the room for reactions, feeding off the attention, while I stood there, trying to decide if I should speak up and ruin the whole night or swallow it and let her have her moment, again. That hesitation, the 1 second of silence I gave her, was all she needed to completely tilt the night in her favor. Guests whispered, some took pictures, and before long, the group chat for our cousins started blowing up with texts about Vanessa being Vanessa. My uncle even raised his glass in a sarcastic toast to the bride, while everyone laughed, and I had to stand there, smiling politely, holding the plaque I had been given, pretending like this didn't sting more than anything she had done in the past. It was a moment I had dreamed about for years, and in one ridiculous entrance, she turned it into a punchline. Now, I need you to understand something. This wasn't the first time, not even close. My sister has always been like this, and for the longest time, I let her get away with it because I thought it was easier than fighting. Growing up, if I protested, my parents told me I was being too sensitive, that Vanessa was just the fun one, and I needed to lighten up. And maybe I believed that for too long, maybe I convinced myself that being silent was the adult thing to do, that I didn't need to compete with her, but in that moment, watching her smirk as people snapped pictures, I realized I wasn't silent because I was mature, I was silent because I was tired of being the one who looked like the bad guy when I fought back. And that night, standing in my own promotion celebration with my career finally recognized, I realized I couldn't let her keep doing this. Vanessa thought she had won again, that she had successfully shifted the spotlight, but something in me snapped, and it wasn't anger in the childish sense of wanting to scream or throw a fit, it was a calm, cold kind of anger. The kind that makes you think very clearly and very carefully about what you are going to do next. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to just swallow the humiliation and carry on. I was going to answer her in a way that would finally make her realize she couldn't keep making a joke out of me. So when she leaned in at the table later and whispered, "Relax, Ratch, you know it's just a joke," while still basking in the attention, I smiled back and said nothing, because I already knew that her joke had cost her more than she could imagine. She thought she was still untouchable, that the family would always cover for her, that I'd be the one who looked too uptight if I reacted. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't planning to react in the moment at all. I was going to wait, and when I finally moved, it would be in a way she never saw coming. That was the night I decided I was done being the quiet one, the dependable sister who absorbed the punches so everyone else could laugh. Vanessa had turned my celebration into her circus, and in doing so, she handed me all the justification I needed to stop protecting her. She thought it was funny. She had no idea I was done being her punchline. If you want to understand why that stunt at my promotion celebration didn't come out of nowhere, you have to know that with Vanessa there has always been this pattern where she decides the rules of engagement, breaks them when they don't suit her, and then leans on the family's soft spot to turn the fallout into a cute anecdote rather than a consequence, which means every time I tried to hold a line I was told to be gracious, to be the bigger person, to remember she is impulsive and fun, and to let it go for the sake of peace, while the cost of that peace was always paid by me in the currency of embarrassment, missed moments, and a reputation as the sister who can't take a joke. I could list the greatest hits the way people list sports stats, not because I am sentimental about them, but because I kept track in my head the way someone keeps track of how many times a debt goes unpaid. The graduation where she turned my speech into a sidebar by staging a loud inside joke in the front row and then claiming she did it to calm her nerves. The college send-off where she told a room full of relatives that I got into my program because I am good at kissing up to professors and then hid behind the line that she was just teasing. The Thanksgiving where she announced a pretend career change for me that wasn't real because it made for better conversation and then apologized to everyone but me once the laughs died down, and the birthday where she organized a surprise that was not actually a surprise at all because she spent the whole time telling people I cried when I opened a card, which I didn't, but by then it didn't matter because the picture was set and I was the uptight one again. My parents did not create that behavior on purpose, and I can even admit they love both of us, but love without limits becomes permission, and permission becomes habit, and habit becomes a personality. So by the time we were adults it felt like our family had assigned roles with the rigidity of a church pageant, Vanessa as the adored wild card and me as the reliable one who would help clean up afterwards and pretend nothing happened. Which works until the day it doesn't, and that day for me was the promotion celebration because I had carried too many boxes alone and let too many credit lines of respect get overdraft. And her walking in like the event was a blank canvas for her next scene told me that if I did not change the way I responded, I would be accepting a lifetime contract as her straight man. People like to think that the decision to stop enabling a pattern is dramatic or explosive, but for me it felt like the opposite, like closing a drawer that had been left open too long. I did not yell at her at the table, I did not make a scene, I did not feed her performance. I just sat there and quietly took inventory of what I had that she did not know I had. And once I started that inventory, I realized I was holding more leverage than I had ever admitted to myself. There was the half-truth my family told themselves about Vanessa's last engagement, the version where she and Tyler chose to part ways because they were young and wanted different things, which sounds tidy and kind. Except I had the screenshots that told the real story because his sister had sent them to me the week everything blew up, and I had saved them like someone saves a contract they hope never to use. Not because I wanted to harm my sister, but because I was tired of being gaslit about what had actually happened. Those screenshots included Vanessa bragging in a private thread about juggling attention from two different guys during the engagement because she felt bored and underappreciated, and mocking Tyler's trust as too easy, and describing how she staged a teary confession about needing space right before his family was due in town so the narrative would land on her terms, which makes a lot of sense once you've watched her reframe events for applause as many times as I have. There was also the voicemail she left me late one night after drinks where she admitted that years back she told our parents I had lied about a class grade so they would stop asking questions about why she had been suspended, and in the voicemail she called it strategic, and then laughed in that way she laughs when she thinks she is being clever. I saved that, too, because once you are the designated straight man, you learn to keep the facts close. None of that felt like something I wanted to use, and if she had let my night be my night, I probably would have allowed those files to remain where they were, gathering digital dust. But when she threw her fake bride entrance over my actual career milestone and then leaned over later to tell me to relax because it was just a joke, What she really did was confirm that she had no interest in the person I am, only in the role I play for her. And that realization made the path ahead surprisingly clear, because I finally accepted that consequences do not appear on their own. They have to be delivered, and the only question that mattered was how to deliver them in a way that was controlled, clean, and impossible to spin. I thought about blasting everything to social media and decided against it because I did not want to look messy, and I did not want to drag my company into family theatrics, and I thought about sending everything to our parents privately and decided against that. Too, because a quiet conversation behind closed doors would only invite another round of "let's not make a big deal," which has been our family's default for as long as I can remember. So I chose the one arena where Vanessa has always felt the safest, the place where she thrives on applause from relatives and never worries about the bill, our long-running family group chat that lights up for births, barbecues, graduations, and every small crisis. The chat where her jokes are treated like public service announcements and my boundaries are treated like mood swings. I did not post evidence that night. I did something much smaller and yet, in our family, much louder, because before I went to bed, I changed the chat name from the chipper title it had carried for years to a new name that said, "For real announcements only." I replaced the old photo with a simple image of the promotion plaque on my desk. And then I dropped one single sentence that did not yell and did not whine but drew a clean line in ordinary words that everyone would understand. From this moment on, every time someone turns my life into a stage, I will answer on the same stage, with facts. The dots appeared under the screen as half the family started typing at once and then stopped, and I turned my phone face down, because the point was not to argue but to make sure the room finally had a wall. And while I slept, Vanessa called twice and sent a string of messages pretending she wanted to apologize for a harmless joke, which I ignored, because in the morning I would begin with something small that could not be misread and could not be softened by her charm. And I would let the momentum build on its own. The morning after the spectacle, when the silence felt like a test I had finally studied for rather than a punishment for speaking up, I opened the family group chat that had greeted births and graduations and casserole sign-ups with the same cheerful noise for years and, without asking permission or softening the edges, I posted the single photo that mattered. The one from the end of my promotion celebration where I am holding the plaque I fought for while Vanessa leans into the frame in a wedding dress and a laugh that tells you everything you need to know about who she believes the main character is. And under that photo, I wrote one steady sentence that did not accuse and did not plead, but simply named the reality everyone had watched and pretended not to understand. Yesterday, I earned a promotion, and my sister chose to turn it into a joke at my expense. And I am done pretending that is charming. The typing bubbles lit up the way they do when relatives feel the heat and try to smother it with paper towels, with my mother suggesting we all take a breath and discuss this later, with my father asking if we could please keep family matters off the chat. Which was funny because the chat has always been the stage for Vanessa when she wants applause, with an aunt insisting it was obviously a prank and that I should learn to laugh, and with two cousins, the ones who usually watch quietly, finally saying out loud that this did not look like a prank at all. It looked like attention taken on credit again, and for once the balance was due. I answered only once, because I had decided that this time the power would live in clarity rather than volume, and I said I would be moving forward with the same transparency that has always been demanded of me when I am the one smoothing things over. Which means we will keep this conversation right here where the spotlight has lived for every one of Vanessa's grand gestures, and if anyone wants to call me sensitive, they can do it with their name on the screen instead of behind a phone call where tone is the scapegoat. Vanessa arrived in the thread like a siren, telling me to relax, telling everyone she was obviously joking, saying she had worn the dress because our family needed a laugh and because she wanted to celebrate love. Which would have landed better if there were not a very recent engagement in her past that ended under circumstances our parents conveniently filed under differences in timing, and then she tried the move that has always worked on me, which is to ask for a phone call and promise that if I just take it she will explain everything and we can keep the peace, a phrase that has usually meant I carry the discomfort while she gets to keep the story. I told her I would not take a call, that the apology she owes does not belong in a whispered sidebar, but right here where the harm was performed. And when she accused me of trying to humiliate her, I said I was not trying to humiliate anyone. I was naming the humiliation that already happened and making sure it did not get rewritten as a cute memory by dinner. To keep conversation from spiraling into noise, I pinned the photo to the top of the chat. I changed the description to a single sentence that said announcements in this space should be real and should not trample other people's milestones. And then I did the calmest thing I have done in our family in years, which was to set a simple boundary with a timer attached. I told Vanessa that by evening she could post an apology that acknowledged the stunt and the harm without excuses, or I would share context she is kept comfortable in the shadows, and I wrote that sentence without threats or adjectives because I wanted the weight to come from the words themselves rather than from theater. The room split, as rooms do when truth walks in without makeup, with the usual peacemakers warning me not to escalate and the quiet cousins sending me private messages that said they were proud of me for finally saying what everyone knows. And while my phone buzzed with calls I would not take, I answered a single message from my father to say I loved him and that I was not trying to make enemies. I was trying to stop a cycle that depends on my silence. By late afternoon, when Vanessa still had not apologized and was instead posting jokes about brides without grooms like nothing mattered except her audience, I delivered the first slice of consequence that did not scream and did not beg but changed the oxygen in the room. Because I wrote one more line to the chat that said this is your last chance to decide whether yesterday was a misunderstanding you will own or a pattern you want recorded. And then, without another word, I attached the cropped screenshot of her text to a friend from the morning of my celebration where she bragged that she was about to steal the show again, which I had because that friend sent it to me last night with a note that said they were tired of being a prop. And the second the preview appeared under my message, the laughter stopped. The excuses fell off a cliff, and the people who always tell me to lighten up went very quiet because the truth did not need my tone to make its point. And as the read receipts stacked up and Vanessa started calling me by my full name in all caps like that could undo anything, I closed the app and poured myself a glass of water because for the first time in a long time I was not hoping for permission or bracing for backlash. I was simply following through, and I knew that if she did not choose honesty by nightfall I would stop hinting and start opening drawers. By the time evening rolled around and the apology I had asked for still hadn't appeared, replaced instead by Vanessa's smug little asides about how people need to relax and enjoy a joke, I understood that the window for polite course correction had closed. So I opened the family chat where birthdays and casseroles usually live and, without preamble or anger that could be used against me, I posted the first screenshot, the one where she messaged a friend on the morning of my celebration saying she was about to steal the show again because I never defend myself and everyone loves when she shakes things up, and I added a single line that I knew would land harder than any lecture, which was that I was giving her one more chance to be honest before I filled in the rest of the picture she has been painting in the family's head for years. The silence that followed felt different from the earlier noise, because it had weight rather than chaos, and after a stretch that told me people were scrolling and rereading and recalibrating, my mother finally typed that she was surprised and disappointed and wished we could take this offline, and my father said he wanted to hear Vanessa's explanation before anyone jumped to conclusions, and an aunt tried to pivot us into a group prayer. But the cousins who have been quiet for a long time did not miss their moment, because they started chiming in with versions of "We love you both, but we have seen this pattern for years," which was the first time I have felt the floor tilt toward reality rather than performance. Since I had promised clarity rather than spectacle, I kept my own contribution measured and deliberate, and I posted a second screenshot cropped to protect collateral people but not the truth. A thread from Vanessa during her last engagement where she bragged about feeling bored and keeping a side thing for the thrill, and where she outlined in disgusting little bullet points how she was going to manufacture a breakup narrative that made her look like the brave one seeking growth while her fiancé looked needy and slow, and under that I wrote that I had kept these receipts for years not to hurt her but because I refused to be gaslit about what actually happened and about the way the family chose to believe the Kinder version because it was easier. and that if she wanted to enter my promotion night in a wedding dress for a laugh, then we could all look at the cost of those laughs. Vanessa exploded in the thread in the predictable way, calling me a traitor, accusing me of hacking, claiming the screenshots were out of context, and threatening to leave the chat forever if we didn't delete them. And when that didn't freeze the room, she switched into the weeping victim who needs a private call and a safe corner, telling me she would apologize if I removed the posts first. Which I would not do because I had learned that once the receipts go back in the drawer, the lies pull their chairs right back up to the table, so I said we would keep everything visible and she could add honesty whenever she was ready, and I also said that I had more I would prefer not to use. But if transparency was the only language she understood, then I would continue speaking it. My father sent me a private message saying he was struggling to process this, and that he loved us both and that he wished I had come to him first, and I told him I loved him too and that I had come to him for years in softer ways, only to be told to lighten up and not make a big deal, and that the big deal was already made the moment my sister turned my career milestone into her stunt, and then laughed when I asked for respect, so I would finish what I started with calm hands, and then we could all talk about healing if people wanted to do that work once the performance ended. To keep faith with my own rules, I drew one more line as steady as I could, telling the group I would share a final piece of context if an apology still did not arrive by night's end, and then I set my phone down and let the clock do the talking. Because reacting to every ping would have invited noise back into the driver's seat, and I wanted the facts to steer this thing to where it needed to go. When the apology did not come and the jokes continued in the form of a winking meme about brides without grooms, I posted what I had kept for a long time and hoped never to use, not the whole archive and not the cruelest bits, but a concise audio transcription of Vanessa's late-night voicemail to me from years ago where she bragged that she had told our parents I lied about a grade so they would stop pressing her about why she was suspended, and where she called the lie strategic and laughed about how easy it was to make me look like the uptight one, and I wrote beneath it that I was done carrying the cost of her strategy, that I would not delete a thing, and that the next move was hers if she could find honesty under all that charm she wears like armor. The chat went dead in a way it never has, with read receipts stacking up like a scoreboard nobody wanted to read out loud, and after a long pause Vanessa stopped asking for a call and started texting please, followed by a promise to apologize if I deleted everything first, which I refused, and then came the message I knew would arrive eventually and that I had engineered this moment to produce, the one where she said I could not possibly have kept everything, and that if I had more I needed to tell her right now because she felt sick not knowing, and I told her there was one more thing that belonged to both of us whether she liked it or not, and that if she still wanted to trade my milestones for her shows then I would press play and let our family hear the part of her story that never makes it to the stage, the thing she confessed on a night when she thought I would always be her vault, which is when the typing bubble appeared and disappeared and appeared again, because she finally understood I was not bluffing and that the next sound she heard could end the act for good. When the typing bubble kept appearing and disappearing like a bad habit that did not know whether to confess or double down, I stopped negotiating with my own second thoughts and did what I had promised I would do if honesty did not show up on its own. Because I attached the actual audio file that had lived in my phone for years like a forgotten alarm, the late-night voicemail where Vanessa admitted she had lied about me to our parents to pull heat off her own suspension and laughed about how easy it was to recast me as the uptight one, and I sent it into the family thread with one line that said this is not a fight and it is not a performance, it is an end to the rewrite. After which I set my phone down and let the room hear her voice without my commentary, without my tone to be blamed, and without any place to hide. The first responses did not come from the usual peacemakers, which told me the ground had already shifted, because it was my father who wrote that he needed a moment and that he was listening again, and it was my mother who said she felt sick and that she had not understood how many times her instinct to preserve the mood had come at my expense. And it was a cousin who rarely says anything who wrote that the laughing had always felt like a tax someone else was paying, and that maybe the tax collector finally got audited, which, for our family, was the closest thing to accountability I had ever seen. Vanessa tried one more pivot, not the loud one this time, but the softer, manipulative one, writing that the audio was from years ago and that people change and that I was dragging old mistakes into a new day. And then she asked again for a private call because she could not breathe seeing everyone look at her like that, and I told her that breathing gets hard when the air is honest, and that if she wanted relief there was a very simple way to get it, which was to say in her own words what she did, why she did it, and how she planned to stop doing it, not to me on a sideline but right there where the applause had always been easy, because the apology did not belong to me alone, it belonged to the people she had conscripted into her audience. When she wrote that she would apologize if I deleted first, I answered the way I had trained myself to answer since yesterday, with calm sentences that did not flinch, saying that nothing would be deleted and that nothing would be moved into a private vault, because visibility was the correction we had refused for too long, and that I would not erase my evidence so she could rebuild the stage tomorrow, and then I added the part of the plan I had not shared yet. The piece that turned this from a one-day blast into a structural change, which was that I had already placed every file in a read-only folder named Real Announcements with a simple log of dates and context, and I had shared it with the chat so that there would be no more pretending we did not know, and so that everyone would understand this was not rage but record-keeping. That was the moment the begging started, not the theatrical kind, but the practical kind, the steady stream of please take it down and I will make it right and you do not understand what this will do to me, and I answered by saying that I did understand. Because it would do to her what she had done to me for years, which was to live under a version of herself that she did not control, and that the only way out was through, and then I made the offer that I had built the whole thing around, the one that would let me win without throwing a match on the whole family, because I told her that if she posted a clear apology in her own words without qualifiers, and if she followed it by hosting a family gathering that was explicitly to celebrate my promotion with no hijacks and no side bits, and if she agreed that for 1 full year she would not stage any announcement or stunt at someone else's milestone and would not enlist anyone to do it for her, then I would lock the folder, I would pin her apology above the thread, and I would agree not to add anything new unless she broke the agreement, which meant she could choose restoration over spectacle for the first time in her life. She called me controlling and vindictive and said I was turning into the hall monitor she always joked I was, and I told her I did not care what name she reached for as long as the behavior changed, and that the offer would expire at noon the next day, after which the folder would remain open as a standing truth and the conversation would move on without her filter. Morning came with a message that did not sound like Vanessa at all, which is how I knew it was finally her, because she wrote, slowly and without emojis or winks, that she had humiliated me at my celebration on purpose because she wanted attention she had not earned, that she had lied in the past to keep the spotlight, and that she had relied on our parents' need for peace to keep getting away with it, and that she was sorry for the years she took and the night she ruined, and that she was going to make amends in the way I asked, not because I forced her but because she had run out of ways to pretend she was the funny one when she was just the loud one, and then she asked me, again, to delete the folder and the messages, and I told her, kindly and finally, that I would not, because the point was not her humiliation, it was my freedom, and deleting the record would put the weight back on me to prove, again and again, that the thing everyone saw had really happened. The family dinner she hosted a week later did not fix a lifetime, and it did not turn us into a sentimental commercial, but she kept the evening quiet. She gave a plain toast that had my name in it and not hers. And when a cousin tried to prompt an old bit, she shook her head and said not tonight, which told me the boundary had teeth, and that maybe the scoreboard was not the only thing that changed. People keep asking if I felt guilty, and the honest answer is that I felt relief first, and then I felt nothing, which is not cold, it is clean, because I did not destroy anyone's life. I did not post to a public feed. I did not call her employer or her ex, and I did not add commentary that would make me the story. I brought receipts into the room where the stunts lived, and I let everyone decide what they wanted to do with a clear picture. And then I gave my sister a way to choose dignity, without letting her erase the bill, which is why when she texted me the next day begging me to delete what I sent to the family group chat I told her, with no heat and no triumph in my voice, that the record stays, the apology stays, and the new rules stay. Because I am done being the quiet one, and because rules that disappear are not rules at all. And when I put my phone down after that, I realized the silence I heard was not punishment, it was space, and I finally had some.